The desert has a simple law: take what you find and survive. But on a road that promises nothing but dust and death, a lost traveler finds a pouch of gold, a fortune heavier than any burden he has ever known. This isn't a gift, it's a test, and the choice he makes in the blazing heat of noon will become a debt that travels farther than any empire, and is paid not with gold, but with his own soul. The sun was a merciless coin nailed to the colorless sky, its heat beating down until the road itself seemed to sweat. Dust devils whirled across the cracked earth like dancers rehearsing their own demise. Ren walked alone, boots powdered white, throat rasping with every breath. His shadow, what little of it the noon glare allowed, clung to his heels like a guilty thought. He had started before dawn, chasing rumors of work at the copper mines beyond the ridge, but the mines had closed and the rumors had scattered like startled crows. Now he carried only an empty waterskin, a heel of bread, and the hollow echo of his father's last words. Survive, boy. Survive without becoming the desert. That was when he saw it. A flash of unnatural gold half swallowed by the roadside grit. At first he thought it a trick of light, a shard of mica winking at him. But the gleam persisted, steady, defiant against the wasteland's dull palette. Ren knelt. The pouch lay curled like a sleeping adder, its leather dark with ancient oil, its mouth laced with crimson cord. When he lifted it, the weight pressed his palm downward with the solemn gravity of a secret. Gold. Not a coin or two, but heavy discs stacked like suns, warm even through the leather. Enough to buy a year of water, a lifetime of bread, a ticket out of the dust forever. Ren's pulse drummed in his ears louder than the distant buzz of cicadas. He glanced left, only the shimmering horizon. Right, only the same. No footprints marred the road, no distant rider. The world felt paused, holding its breath. A lesser man would have run. Ren felt the thought rise, hot, metallic, tempting. He could vanish into the dunes, become a legend whispered in taverns. The orphan who outwitted the desert. Yet something in the pouch's heft felt deliberate, like a question posed by the world itself. He turned it over. A sigil had been branded into the leather, a hawk clutching a lotus. The symbol stirred a half-remembered lullaby his mother used to hum, something about balance, about debts repaid in unexpected coin. Hoofbeats thundered faintly behind him, growing louder. Ren's fingers tightened. A single rider, cloaked in rags the color of storm clouds, galloped a lathered mare. The strangers had shadowed a face gaunt as drought, but his eyes, when they met Ren's, were startlingly clear, like pools fed by an underground spring. Ren's heart hammered against his ribs. Return it and walk away poorer. Keep it and risk whatever storm followed. The rider slowed, reining in a dozen paces away. Dust settled in slow-motion veils. The mare snorted, flecks of foam falling like snow. In that suspended second, Ren felt the desert judge him. The cicadas screamed. The sun pressed its thumbprint between his shoulder blades. He lifted the pouch. Looking for this? His voice cracked from thirst, but the words rang steady. The stranger's gaze flicked from Ren's face to the gold and back again. Something ancient and unreadable passed across those hollow eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. He inclined his head, a gesture more courtesy than command. It seems the road has chosen its courier, the wanderer said, voice soft as wind over dry grass. And perhaps its next guardian. Ren stepped forward, dust rising around his boots like incense. The pouch dangled between them, a bridge of gold glinting in the noon fire. Temptation tugged one last time, then loosened its claws. He held it out. The stranger took it without touching Ren's fingers, as though the gold itself were sacred. From beneath his cloak he withdrew a pinch of ash, gray, fine, smelling faintly of cedar. He pressed it to Ren's cheek, just below the left eye. The mark felt cool, then warm, then gone. Remember, the wanderer whispered. Mercy is the only coin that multiplies when spent. Before Ren could answer, the mare wheeled, hooves drumming a retreat into shimmering heat. The rider became a smudge, then a speck, then nothing. The road stretched empty again, dust already erasing hoofprints. Ren stood alone, heart quieter now, cheek tingling where ash had kissed skin. The sun had slipped a notch lower, long shadows beginning to stitch themselves across the sand. Somewhere ahead, the mines remained closed. Behind, the pouch's weight had vanished, but something heavier had settled in its place. He tightened the strap of his empty waterskin and walked on, not toward fortune, but toward whatever reckoning the road had decided to offer next. The desert wind carried a faint scent of cedar and gold, and in its hush Ren thought he heard his mother's lullaby again. Only now the words were clear. What you give away will one day carry you home. The stranger's mare had long since vanished beneath the heat-shimmered horizon, yet the dust of its passing still hung in the air like incense refusing to settle. Ren stood rooted where the road met emptiness, the taste of ash on his tongue and the stranger's last words echoing in the hollow of his chest. He had expected relief, gold returned, burden lifted, but what he felt was something closer to vertigo, as though the desert itself had tilted beneath him. The pouch was gone, yet its weight pressed harder now, a phantom pressure against his ribs. He touched the faint gray smear beneath his left eye. The ash was warm, as if it held a heartbeat separate from his own. A wind rose, soft as breath, carrying the scent of cedar and something older. Smoke from a fire that had burned 100 years ago. Ren closed his eyes. For an instant he thought he heard hoofbeats again. But when he looked, the horizon remained a flat blade of light. Only the wind moved, shifting sand into brief, elegant runes that erased themselves as quickly as they formed. He should have walked on. His waterskin was still empty, the sun still cruel, the copper mines still days away. Instead, he sat cross-legged on the road's warm spine and waited. Not for the stranger, not for water, but for understanding. The ash mark tingled, a pulse beneath the skin that matched the rhythm of his own blood. Each throb seemed to whisper, "You have been chosen not to carry gold, but to carry something far heavier." The silence stretched until the afternoon shadows grew long and blue. Somewhere far off, a hawk cried, once, sharp, as if calling a name that wasn't quite Ren's. When he finally rose, his legs felt heavier, as though the earth had grown fond of his weight and did not wish to release him. Night came sudden and absolute. The desert shed its heat so quickly that Ren's breath fogged in the starlight. He made no fire, rolled no blanket. He lay on his back, the sky a bowl of shattered diamonds above him, and listened. At first he heard only his own heartbeat. Then, beneath it, a quieter cadence, like a second heart, steady and patient, beating somewhere beyond the horizon. He dreamed, though he did not sleep. In the dream, the stranger stood at the edge of a great circle drawn in ash. Inside the circle lay the gold pouch, open, its coins glinting like tiny suns. The stranger did not speak. He simply extended one hand toward Ren, palm up, fingers curled. When Ren stepped forward, the ash circle flared white-hot, and the coins melted into liquid light that flowed up the stranger's arm and vanished into the hollow of his throat. Ren woke gasping. The stars had shifted. The moon now hung low and red as a wound. His cheek burned where the ash had touched him. He pressed his fingers to it and felt the mark pulse. Once, twice. Like a drum summoning an army only he could hear. Dawn arrived pale and hesitant. Ren rose, bones creaking like old wood. The road before him looked different now. Not narrower, but deeper, as if every grain of sand had been weighed and found significant. He took one step, then another. Each footfall left a faint gray print where the ash mark brushed the dust. And though the wind tried, it could not erase them. By midday, the land began to change. The dunes gave way to low, scrub-covered hills. A thin stream appeared, its water tasting faintly of cedar and copper. Ren knelt to drink, and when he lifted his face, he saw the reflection in the water. Not his own, but the stranger's eyes, clear, ancient, looking back at him through the rippling surface. He jerked away, heart hammering. The reflection vanished. Only his own gaunt face remained, the ash mark now a dark line beneath his eye like a tear that had forgotten how to fall. That evening he reached a crossroads, 3 paths splitting the earth like open veins. One led east toward distant mountains, another south toward the sea, the third west into a forest whose edges were already black with night. Ren stood at the center, the dying sun painting the sky in shades of bruise and gold, and waited. The wind returned, softer now, carrying the stranger's voice on its breath. Mercy is the only coin that multiplies when spent. Ren closed his eyes. The ash mark burned, not with pain but with purpose. When he opened them again, the choice was no longer his to make. The western path shimmered faintly, each tree at its edge outlined in silver light. He walked. Behind him, the crossroads began to fade, the other paths folding into shadow until only the western road remained, solid and unmarked. Ahead, the forest waited, dark, patient, hungry. Ren did not look back. The ash mark on his cheek had begun to glow, a small, steady ember guiding him into whatever reckoning the wanderer had set in motion long before Ren had ever knelt on that sun-scorched road. Somewhere deep in the trees, a hawk cried again. This time, Ren did not flinch. He simply adjusted the strap of his empty waterskin and walked on, each step carrying him further from the man he had been and closer to the debt he had unwittingly agreed to pay. The capital burned. Crimson banners snapped from the palace parapets like torn arteries, and the air tasted of pitch and panic. Columns of smoke rose in spirals, braiding with the sunset until the sky itself bled. Soldiers in mismatched armor poured through shattered gates, their blades flashing like white-hot coins tossed by a mad god. Everywhere, the scream of metal on metal, the crackle of cedar beams, the high, thin wail of children caught between. Ren arrived at the fringe of the inferno with nothing but the clothes on his back and the ash mark pulsing beneath his eye like a second heartbeat. The copper mines had never materialized. Instead, news had reached him on the road. Rebels in the north, the emperor besieged, a price on every stranger's head. He should have turned aside, but the western path had narrowed until there was only one direction left, forward into the furnace. At the outer barricade, a guard seized his arm. "Name and allegiance." "Run," he answered, tasting smoke. "Allegiance to the road." The guard laughed, a brittle, frightened sound, and shoved him into a milling throng of refugees, merchants, and soldiers who no longer knew which side they fought for. Overhead, arrows hissed like hornets. Someone shoved a bloodied child into his arms. A moment later the child was gone, swallowed by the surge. Heat slapped his face. Cinders stung his cheeks. The ash mark burned, sudden and fierce, as if a coal pressed beneath the skin. He staggered through shattered streets where silk awnings flapped like burning wings. In the central square, rebels had erected a rough scaffold. 3 men in imperial robes knelt beneath the headsman's axe. Their faces were marble pale, eyes wide with the knowledge that history was about to pivot. Ren's stomach lurched. He recognized the sigil on the nearest robe, a hawk clutching a lotus. The same hawk branded into the leather pouch weeks ago on the sun-scorched road. The same hawk now stitched in gold thread across the breast of a man about to die. A horn blast cut the air. Soldiers in imperial white surged from the palace gates, forming a bristling phalanx. At their center walked a figure cloaked in ash-colored rags, bare feet silent on the blood-slick stones. The hood was thrown back now. Hollow cheeks, silver hair, eyes like winter water. The wanderer, except he did not walk like a wanderer. He moved like an emperor's shadow given flesh, every step deliberate, every gesture a pronouncement. The crowd parted without being asked. Even the rebels hesitated, blades half-raised, as if some older law than violence held them in check. The headsman lifted his axe. The wanderer lifted a hand. Steel froze mid-air. Not magic exactly, more like memory made manifest. The axe wavered, then lowered, the headsman's face draining of color. In the sudden hush, the wanderer's voice carried, soft, yet it sliced through smoke and screams alike. "This man owes a debt older than your rebellion." The crowd stirred. Whispers rippled outward. The Grey Counselor, the Emperor's whisper, the man who once saved the Empire with a single sentence. Run felt the ash mark flare, branding his skin with memory. He tried to step back, but the press of bodies held him fast. The wanderer's gaze found him across the square, calm, unsurprised, as if he had been expecting Ren all along. "Bring the traveler forward," the wanderer said. Hands shoved Ren through the throng. He stumbled onto the scaffold, boots skidding on fresh blood. The condemned men stared at him with desperate hope. Soldiers ringed the platform, crossbows leveled. The wanderer's voice dropped to a murmur meant only for Ren and the executioner. 3 weeks ago, on the road to Osiris, this man returned a fortune he did not own. By that act, he bound himself to a promise. Today the promise is called due. The headsman's knuckles whitened on the axe handle. Imperial law demands. Imperial law, the wanderer interrupted, is a child that forgets the name of its father. This traveler carries the mark of an older jurisdiction. He touched 2 fingers to Ren's cheek, exactly where the ash had been pressed. The mark blazed white-hot, then cooled to a dull ember. Around them, the air shimmered like heat above a forge. A captain stepped forward, uncertainty cracking his voice. "Advisor, the rebels will wait," the wanderer replied. "They understand patience. It is why they have come this far. Cut these heads and you cut the Empire's memory. Spare them, and you may yet remember why you fought." Silence stretched taut as drawn bowstring. Somewhere a child cried. A burning roof collapsed with a roar, sending sparks spiraling into the bruised sky. The captain lowered his sword. The headsman set the axe aside. The crowd exhaled as one. Ren stood between empire and insurrection, life and death, past and future, balanced on the edge of a single gesture from a man whose name he had never learned. The ashmark throbbed in rhythm with the heartbeat of the city itself. The wanderer leaned close, breath cool against Ren's ear. "The debt is repaid, but debts like embers travel. Walk carefully, traveler. The road is not finished with you yet." Behind them, the palace gates groaned open. Imperial guards parted to allow the condemned men passage, shackled but alive. Ren watched them stumble into the torchlight, robes torn, faces streaked with tears and grime, yet breathing. A hand grasped his shoulder, rough, urgent. A rebel scout dragged him from the scaffold into the surge of bodies. Shouts erupted. Crossbows fired. The wanderer melted back into the smoke, hood drawn low once more. Ren ran, lungs burning, the ash mark a coal of memory against his skin. Behind him, the city convulsed. Flames licking higher, voices rising in a chorus that was half triumph, half lament. Ahead, the night yawned open, promising nothing except more road, more dust, more choices that would echo longer than any empire. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk screamed. Once, sharp, carrying the sound of wings and lotus petals across the burning dark. The palace dungeons breathed damp iron and despair. Torches guttered in brackets shaped like screaming eagles, their flames too starved to cast real light. Ren huddled on a stone shelf, wrists shackled to a ringbolt older than the empire itself. 3 nights had passed since the scaffold. 3 nights since the wanderer's voice had sliced through smoke and saved 3 lives. His among them. Now the price came due. The ash mark on Ren's cheek no longer glowed. It burned. A slow, steady coal pulsing in time with his pulse, reminding him with every throb that mercy was never free. Guards had dragged him here at spear point, not for the crime of being a rebel, but for the crime of being noticed. Somewhere above, scribes and generals were rewriting the night's chaos, and the only clear thread was the stranger's single sentence. "This man carries an old debt." They wanted the thread's origin. They wanted Ren. Footsteps approached, measured, soft, impossible. The cell door, iron-banded oak thick as a man's forearm, swung inward without a key. The wanderer stepped through the gloom as though it were merely inconvenient weather. He wore the same ash-colored rags, but here, in the Empire's bowels, they seemed spun from smoke and starlight. The torches bent toward him, flames bowing like courtiers. Ren's throat tasted of rust. "I never asked to be saved." "No," the wanderer replied, voice low, almost tender, "but you asked to survive. The two are rarely the same." He knelt, shackles parting under the brush of 2 fingers. Metal sighing open as if remembering it had once been molten. Ren rubbed raw wrists, suspicion warring with gratitude. The Emperor's men will hunt us both. Only if we leave by the gate. The Wanderer turned, motioning to the rear wall. Mortar cracked. A slab pivoted on hidden hinges, revealing a shaft no wider than a coffin, descending into darkness that smelled of cedar and old parchment. A draft breathed up from it, carrying distant chanting. Monks or ghosts, impossible to tell. Ren hesitated. What happens if I refuse? The Wanderer's eyes held the quiet patience of someone who had watched empires rise and fall and found the drama mildly repetitive. Then you die tonight, and the debt passes to your shadow. Shadows are poor company. Ren touched the ash mark. It throbbed like a second conscience. He thought of the scaffold, of the condemned men's faces when the axe did not fall, of the rebel scout who had pulled him into anonymity only to have anonymity spit him back out. He thought of his father's last words, survive without becoming the desert, and wondered if survival always required becoming something else. He stepped into the shaft. Stones scraped his shoulders. The air grew cooler, scented with ink and candle smoke. After a lifetime of descent, his boots touched damp earth. A narrow corridor stretched ahead, lit by a single lantern suspended from a hook shaped like a hawk. The Wanderer did not follow. The slab closed behind Ren with a whisper of finality. Alone he walked. The corridor wound like a serpent through the palace's buried heart. Tapestries rotted on unseen walls. Somewhere water dripped with the persistence of regret. At each turn, the ash mark flared, guiding him by temperature alone. Left when it cooled, right when it burned. He passed cells where prisoners muttered in languages older than stone. He passed storerooms stacked with scrolls sealed by emperors whose names had already been forgotten. At last, a door of black wood barred his path. No handle, no lock, only the same hawk and lotus sigil branded into its center. The ash mark blazed white-hot, and the door swung inward without a sound. Inside, the Wanderer waited, no longer in rags, but in robes the color of moonlight on water. A single candle burned between them, its flame steady despite the draft. On a low table lay the leather pouch, open, coins arranged in a perfect circle around a single, withered lotus petal. Sit, the Wanderer said. We negotiate. The remainder of your debt. Ren's knees folded without permission. I have nothing left to give. Nothing but yourself. The candle flame guttered, then straightened. Shadows danced across the walls like memories rehearsing their lines. The Wanderer continued, the empire will fall before the next moon. Fire, famine, betrayal, the usual crescendos. When it falls, men will search for someone to blame. They will search for a symbol. You, Ren, will be that symbol. Ice formed in Ren's stomach. I'm no one. Precisely. No titles, no allegiances, no past but the road. Perfect vessel. You will walk into the chaos carrying this pouch, empty now but heavy nonetheless, and you will offer it to whoever holds the knife. Mercy in the shape of gold. Mercy that remembers. Ren stared at the lotus petal, brittle and brown. And if I refuse? The Wanderer's smile was gentle, terrible. Then the scaffold happens again, only this time the axe does not pause. And the men you saved tonight will die knowing mercy was a mirage. Silence pooled between them, thick as melted bronze. Ren felt the weight of futures balanced on the thin ridge of his spine. He thought of the scaffold, of the hawk clutching a lotus, of cedar smoke and distant chanting. He thought of his father's voice, survive without becoming the desert, and wondered if survival sometimes required becoming the storm instead. He reached for the pouch. The leather was warm, alive, as if it held not absence but possibility. When he closed his fingers around it, the ash mark on his cheek cooled to the temperature of moonlight. Done, he said. The Wanderer inclined his head. The road will call you again. When it does, remember, mercy is the only coin that multiplies when spent. But it spends you, too. A bell tolled somewhere above, deep, sonorous, the heartbeat of a dying empire. The candle snuffed out. In the darkness, The hawk and lotus sigil glowed once, brief as a heartbeat, then vanished. Ren stood alone in a corridor that no longer existed. Behind him, the black door had become seamless stone. Ahead, a staircase spiraled upward toward the scent of smoke and the sound of distant shouting. He climbed. The ash mark guided him, cool when he chose left, warm when he chose right, until he emerged into a moonlit courtyard where guards lay unconscious, throats unmarked, dreams untroubled. A side gate stood ajar, its hinges oiled for just such an escape. He stepped through. Behind him, the palace burned brighter than any sunrise. Ahead, the road waited, long, hungry, patient. In his pocket, the empty pouch felt heavier than gold had ever been. On his cheek, the ash mark throbbed in time with a promise he had not asked to make but could no longer refuse. Somewhere in the city, a hawk screamed. Ren did not look back. He walked into the night carrying mercy like a brand, knowing the desert had not finished with him yet, and neither had the debt. The road stretched on, swallowing his footprints one by one, until only the ash mark remained, glowing faintly, a quiet ember against the dark. The empire did not fall with thunder. It fell with the soft collapse of parchment curling in a brazier, with the hush of 1,000 officials packing seals into velvet pouches and slipping out side doors. It fell while Ren walked the northern road under a sky scrubbed clean by autumn wind, the empty pouch hanging from his belt no longer leather but living memory. 3 seasons had passed since the dungeons. 3 seasons of walking villages where roofs sagged under snow, of trading the word mercy for crusts of bread, of watching the ash mark fade from coal to pale gray, yet never quite disappear. Every time he feared it had vanished, a child would stare, point, whisper, "He's marked." And Run would feel the throb again, gentle as a heartbeat across centuries. Word traveled faster than armies. In every marketplace, bards sang of the hawk and lotus pouch, how a nameless traveler walked into burning capitals and walked out with lives instead of gold. The story grew like fireweed. Some said the pouch brimmed with invisible coins that clinked only when given away. Others swore the ash mark glowed when lies were spoken nearby. Ren never corrected them. Stories, like mercy, multiplied when left unclaimed. Tonight the road crested a ridge above the Willow Sea, moonlight silvering the dunes until they looked like frozen waves. Ren stopped, breathed. The pouch, a thing once heavy with gold, now weighed no more than a sparrow, yet its emptiness pressed against his ribs like fullness. A single light glimmered below, an inn whose signboard creaked in the wind, the last lantern. He descended. Inside, the hearth was small but fierce. Travelers hunched over bowls of barley broth, their faces carved by flame and shadow. No one looked up when Ren entered. They were too busy listening to the woman by the fire. Her voice was low, river smooth, and carried the authority of someone who had once decided the fate of nations. She wore no crown, no jewels, only a cloak the color of old ash, hood pushed back to reveal silver hair braided with lotus seeds. The wanderer, older, thinner, somehow more, met Ren's gaze and smiled the way you smile at a memory you weren't sure was yours or someone else's. The room quieted. "You're late," she said, not unkindly. Ren's fingers brushed the pouch. "The road took longer than I thought." "Mercy always does." She gestured to the empty stool beside her. He sat. Between them, the fire popped, sending up a swirl of sparks that spelled fleeting pictures. Scaffold, hawk, lotus, road. Around them, the inn's patrons leaned closer, drawn by something older than curiosity. The wanderer lifted a hand. Light flickered across her palm like liquid gold, though her fingers held nothing. "Tell them," she said. Ren inhaled cedar smoke and memory. He began where the road began, with a lone traveler, a pouch glinting in dust, a choice heavier than coin. He spoke of dungeons and doorways, of axes paused mid-air, of cities crumbling like parchment too close to flame. He spoke softly, but every syllable rang against the hearthstones like struck bells. When he finished, no one clapped. Instead, a young boy rose, approached the fire, and placed a single copper coin into Ren's open pouch. The coin made no sound, Yet the pouch seemed to deepen, as if it had swallowed a sunrise. One by one, others followed. A baker sliding in a loaf still warm from the oven. A weaver tucking a length of indigo thread. A soldier adding a dented medal that had once pinned a dying friend's cloak. Each gift was small, ordinary, weightless. Yet with each offering the pouch grew lighter, until Rin felt it might float from his fingers and become a star. The wanderer watched, eyes reflecting firelight and centuries. When the last gift, a dried lotus petal from the boy's pocket, fell inside, she reached across and touched the ash mark on Ren's cheek. The mark flared once, white, gold, then gone, leaving only smooth skin and the faint scent of cedar. "Debt discharged," she whispered. "But mercy earned. Interest. Look." She turned the pouch inside out. Instead of emptiness, a soft glow spilled across her palms. Hundreds of tiny lights, each the color of a different dawn. They rose, swirled, and settled on every traveler in the room. The baker's hands glowed with the warmth of fresh bread. The weaver's loom gleamed with indigo rivers. The soldier's chest burned with the steady courage of a heartbeat shared. Run felt the glow settle over him too. Not weight, but wings. His lungs filled with wind that tasted of every road he had walked and every road he had yet to walk. Outside, the moon slipped behind a cloud, then emerged brighter, as if it, too, had been repaid. The wanderer stood. The empire is gone. Stories remain. Carry them farther than empires ever reach. She walked to the door, paused, and looked back. Not at Run, but at the roomful of glowing faces. Remember, mercy is the only coin that multiplies when spent. And tonight we are all rich. She stepped into the night. Run followed to the threshold. The road stretched silver under starlight, no longer hungry but welcoming. Footprints began behind him, his own and others he could not yet name, pressing into dust that would remember kindness longer than marble remembered kings. He tightened the strap of an empty pouch that somehow felt full. Behind him, the inn's lantern burned steady, casting a circle of gold on the threshold. Ahead, the road curved beyond the ridge toward places unmarked on any map. Rin took the first step. Somewhere high above, a hawk cried. Once, sharp, carrying the sound of lotus petals opening against the dark. The echo lingered like a promise. Every debt repaid becomes a bridge, and bridges, once built, belong to the wind. He walked on, no longer a debtor, no longer a traveler, but a keeper of the quiet, multiplying coin. Mercy humming in his blood like a song the road had waited a lifetime to learn.